I don't want to hear you talk about the restoration of the marriage. I think that's a discussion for later. Just take that pressure off that you're trying to put this all back together. So if you're in a situation where it's been separated and it's not final, if you remove that if you refuse to talk about it, you'll see a reaction in the abuser, and that'll be your answer. This is about an effort to help this person who's abusive as much as it is to help the person getting out. So you do neither of them any good by just trying to put them back together. The higher call is their healing as brother and sister in Christ, not as reunited in marriage. You can have healing and restoration as two people as members of the body and never have them get back together.
I'm Todd, and I was naughty. I did everything wrong. I got kicked out of art school, I drank heavily, and I looked to other religions and versions of spirituality to get fulfilled. The problem was, I was in the occult and I didn't even know it. My life was a wreck, and I had to learn what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus.
And I'm Laura. I was super nice. I did everything right. I got saved young, went to Moody Bible Institute, got married, and followed the Christian rules to having a good life. Problem was, that formula didn't work. I had to change how I related with Jesus.
At the end of the day, what I learned is the very simple truth. Jesus is the answer, and the only one that will ever actually fulfill you.
Naughty versus nice.
Welcome back to Naughty versus Nice. I'm Todd.
And I'm Laura.
I'm Kelly.
The last episode we talk about solutions for people going through divorce, Christians that are in the church, in their church community, and are being confronted with the very real idea that they're in an abusive relationship and that divorce is on the horizon for them. We've already covered within this topic that there's a little more gray area to some of this than I think the modern church kind of tend to look at this very in hard contrast black and white issue. To give an example, we all know that the church would say the only reason you should get divorced is for sexual infidelity. The Bible doesn't say somebody beating your kids is a reason to get divorced. I would argue, and as we have argued this entire time, when you actually look at the overall principles, especially of what's found in the Old Testament, you'll see that this principle is there, that divorce ends up being something that God specifically institutes because of the hard-heartedness of men and in order to protect women and children. So we don't have to have scripture saying you can get divorced because your psychopathic husband is tuning up your kids. You can be confident in knowing the character of God, the reason for the way that he's set things up, and already know that it is in context to what the Bible actually talks about.
And that's what never made sense to me is I think recently someone told you that if you have to push really hard to make it make sense, that's your sign that it's not the right thing. That was what it always was. Like, because people would say, well, you can only divorce for these two reasons. And I would think, really? Because what if he's like a raging alcoholic that is just destroying your lives from the inside out, but he didn't hit you and he didn't have an affair. So that did not fit with how relationship works. It didn't fit with how God is, but yet I couldn't find the verse that said it. And so I would encourage, if someone's just listening to this episode and they would go back to the first couple of episodes where we talk about the biblical passages. For me, I need to know it's solid and that this is truth. It's not somebody's opinion that, yeah, of course God wouldn't want you to live with that anymore. That's fine, but you need to prove it to me. So I think that proof is there.
Yeah, we're not reinventing scripture, so you'll give us money so we can buy a brand new car. I need a new jet airplane. The Lord wants me to do missionary work in other countries. I can't be flying coach. We're not talking like that.
You can't do that voice. Then be serious. then I'm looking over at Kelly and she's glaring at you.
Yeah, well, the irony is we've been talking about psychopaths being married this entire time, and it's like, so looking at what's actually there and seeing the character of God and taking everything into account. So in that last episode, we talked about what a person who's going through this, what can they do? How can they get their ducks in a row? What kind of things can they pay attention to, see, or get prepared for having to go through the ordeal? And what's that look like? It's a long time. This is a life-changing decision. This is not something that's going to be easy. There's going to be struggles. And as a result, definitely, if you've got a friend or a faithful person, a family member that can walk through this walk with you and what they might need to consider, getting educated, figuring out what's going on, realizing there is a part of the conflict and the strife of this potential situation that's going to bleed into their life as well, and giving them hopefully the the heads up, at a minimum, it's going to affect your marriage, your relationships, and definitely it's going to change the way that you're doing your walk with Christ.
So are we ready to jump into the church solution?
Absolutely. So one of the first things that I want to point out, one of the things that we've kind of, all three of us have been in on education. To get your feet wet on things, we do have some books that we've mentioned over the course of time, but that the Narcissist Playbook is a very, very good resource to start with. There are plenty of countless YouTube channels that are out there where people talk about narcissistic behavioral disorders as well as sociopathy, and to give you an idea of a place to start when we're talking about people that are involved in abusive relationships where divorce is definitely a solution, okay? Let's be frank about it, because of this behavioral disorder in one or the other of the two involved. So education.
And I think to begin as a foundation for any leadership as you approach this, everybody typically approaches and says, how do we fix it? And I think that restoration is a better word than reconciliation. And the base thing is reconciliation should follow a process. So the abuser should reconcile with himself. What I mean is that he would come to a place where he actually saw he had a problem, genuinely. Then he would be reconciled to God, like David, understanding that to the Lord he had sinned first. So that's a different restoration. Then restoration in the body, that means accountability, it means relationship and confession in the body, fellowship, other people coming around and knowing what's going on. And I don't want to hear you talk about the restoration of the marriage. I think that's a discussion for later. Just take that pressure off that you're trying to put this all back together. So if you're in a situation where it's been separated and it's not final, if you remove that if you refuse to talk about it, you'll see a reaction in the abuser, and that'll be your answer. But just viewing it as restoration of, this is about an effort to help this person who's abusive as much as it is to help the person getting out. So you do neither of them any good by just trying to put them back together. The higher call is their healing as brother and sister in Christ, not as reunited in marriage. You can have healing and restoration as two people as members of the body and never have them get back together.
Even to kind of one-up it, and if you're in your head, you're like, no, they have to get back together. I've been programmed this way. Okay, then what's the difference between them getting back together in 2 weeks versus 10 years? Let's just say, all I'm saying is, let's take the pressure of that immediacy off the table. And like I say, I think that you're 100% correct on this. They have to be reconciled with Christ. They have to be reconciled with the body before you're even talking about doing that with the concept of marriage. Because here's the irony. In order for most churches to perform a wedding for anyone, the first thing they're going to want is that they know that their relationship with Christ is grounded and solid. Then they actually are members of that church and are in good standing with that church. Then they want to have counseling with the pastor or somebody in leadership. Then they're going to consider actually performing that ceremony. You got 4 layers of protection in order to prevent people from making a terrible mistake entering into the covenant of marriage. Then why aren't we, at a minimum, installing those exact same layers of protection in order to ensure that thinking of the idea, putting them back into a place of the concept of reconciliation even happens? They have to be there, and they're not. It's, let's get everybody at a table, put it back together, kiss and make up. Great. Day's adjourned. Let's go have Sizzler.
And a different way to look at it, if it's a struggler. You said Sizzler, and it threw me off. I was like, what is a Sizzler? It got in my head.
Going to Sizzler.
Okay. Let me rethink what I was saying. If you're struggling to see it as we want it to put it back together, something that flipped it, a couple of statements flipped it for me. One was, if you encourage a woman to stay with a man who is acting that way, it's actually not loving. It is more loving to step out of that man's life in such a way that he would actually see the problem, because you've removed your kind of enabling presence to it. So view it, the ending of the marriage might be the most loving thing that can be done for him, the abuser, not just for the victim. And that was what my counselor finally said. At the end of the day, if God is holding your husband in one hand and your marriage in the other to save your husband or to, redeem this situation for him personally, he'll throw out the marriage in a heartbeat. And I thought that was such a revolutionary thought. learn to view it that way. The value of that man really, really experiencing redemption in his character or being saved at all is far more important than saving the marriage.
There's, hopefully I'm going to get her name right, Diane Langford, Langberg. Diane Langberg has she's been studying this phenomenon since the 70s, and one of the pioneers of the idea of the PTSD that kind of comes across through women in abusive relationships and abusive marriages, and how that shows up in the church specifically. And she has a training program that is available for free. Anybody can go to, and I would definitely recommend that church leadership, that if you don't know who to trust when it comes to good information in books, good information in videos or anything on YouTube, start with her. Start there. This is somebody with 40 years of experience on the topic, who pioneered many of the concepts and many of the ideas that many of us have come to recognize today have proven to be true because of the duration of time, and history has borne these truths out. Her resources in the wealth of information that she has, and her ability to present it cogently, clearly, and efficiently is almost unmatched, and that's a place to start.
And I think it's Church Cares is maybe the website, but it's Becoming a Church That Cares is a book. You can get the book, but then they have a program you can go through as training in your leadership, and it's videos, and it'll bring lawyers in, it brings police in, it brings pastors in, and it starts to present things from all sides so you don't feel like you're walking through this process blind. She also is either a participant in or the starter of Grace, it's all capitals, GRACE, and that is an organization that you as a church, if you have an allegation or a situation in your church, you can bring them in to be a third-party investigator. The other thing, I think they actually come in and help you prevent it as well, like building systems and policies that can prevent sexual assault and all these different things within the church. So yeah, you just Google her, you'll find almost everything you need as far as an organization, how to approach preventing, handling, managing, recovering, either on the corporate level of the church or just in a marriage, whichever it would be.
Well, I know what you're thinking too, right? You're like, oh, that's only for the super big churches, right? We only have 40 people in our church. We don't need to have any kind of policy. We don't need to have any kind of training. The Lord will just give us discernment. Maybe God shows up in many mysterious ways, but you and your 3 elders can sit down and you guys can go through Diane's videos. You can start there, get involved, because if you think, no, there's no abuse that's happening in our congregation, I promise you at least one person, something is going on that's not being talked about or everybody is collectively ignoring. And if we're called to be shepherds for the flock, then you need to do it. You need to be a shepherd. A shepherd doesn't, prepare the sheep for the wolf for it, so the wolf doesn't have any difficulty. You want to put as many fences, as many barriers, as many problems in confounding, frustrating situations in between the wolf and the sheep as possible. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is by getting educated.
In line with the shepherding idea, something that I have seen happen to me, it happens to other people. If you are a couple and you are active or attending a church and then you split and the woman isn't in attendance anymore, that's my situation. The pastor, if he isn't involved in the situation, should be reaching out to her, but other people in the congregation should. Don't be afraid to just say, hey, I know something's going on. I don't need to know what's going on, but I just want to offer you, that I'm thinking of you. I've noticed you've left. The main thing, though, is not just the being nice, but if you're a pastor and you haven't been involved in the situation and you see that marriage end and say that woman's just gone, you don't know where she is, whatever, seek her out to ask what happened, because if that guy is still in your church and they end up splitting, you never get an idea of what happened, and he may be a bigger problem than you think. I think it's worth looking into, especially you'll get a vibe. You'll get a vibe from the people left. You'll get a vibe from him. Whatever it is, don't let that just go. You need to know that information, and she needs to be able to tell you that. It's a great way to show support.
It's 2025. Most people will download the app that your church recommends. Most people will give you their email, and most people will give you their phone number. So if you're involved in leadership, you'll have the access to and the ability to get minimum contact information for anybody in your congregation. And yes, so if something like that happens, you notice, definitely reach out. There is an unpersoning that happens. It's funny to me because we're all in Christ's body. Except when you leave the church, then you don't exist anymore, okay? But then how awkward is that going to be when we're all in eternity forever? And it's like, hey, remember me? Remember when I stopped existing? Here I am! We're going to spend forever together, you know? You don't want to have that awkward situation going on. So definitely reach out. Definitely let's try to have a little more compassion and understanding and just recognize not everybody's life, this is a radical thought, not everybody's life is going to show up in the world the way yours is. As crazy as that sounds. So understanding that there are different paths for different people and God is the one that's sovereign over all of this, and we all have our part to play within the body. So at a minimum, definitely collect that information and reach out.
Two things more that I'm thinking about with the church as far as leadership. If the wounded party, I don't know what to call it, the woman in most of these cases, the divorce has happened, you've walked through it with them, and now it's ended. And the congregation as a whole really doesn't always know what's going on. Mine's 13, 14 years ago, my mentor said just within the last year, what never happened for you that should have happened is that a leadership should have validated what you did and said, this was a good decision, this was right. You don't have to have a big ceremony or something, but for a congregation at large to know, especially if you stay in the church that you were attending as a couple, for the church to acknowledge and validate that has a lot of power, and that was never done. I think she thinks that would have been helpful. I certainly don't want to do it now, but maybe back then. The other thing is, we are so programmed, even in the way we're talking about it, to think that this is the worst thing that's happened. It isn't. I mean, it is a horrible thing. We have to start realizing that we're looking at our Christian lives as something to be comfortable and happy. And if we've gotten to the end of it and no big bad thing has happened like this, that was the best success story. This is still a beautiful part of how God is edifying that believer and the body, and they will learn and grow so much if you can present it as something in their life that is not a deviation from the right path or something. This is really, it is a horrible thing. Acknowledging somebody's pain is one thing, but pretending that this is like unfortunate, like, oh, your life is kind of bad now, and instead viewing this as a tragedy, a trial within the hand of God to build up his love relationship with them. If they are walked well with, they will grow phenomenally more than some people who never encounter that same kind of tragedy.
Absolutely. And as we know from Romans 8:28, and I'm going to misquote it, but everything is good for those that love God and are those according to his purpose. So it is, at the end of the day, all about the glorification of God. That's why he has history. That's why he has us. That's why all of this stuff is going on, is to reveal the mystery of God's glory and how it shows up. And it shows up in tragedy as well as in what we would call, something awesome that's going on. God has his perspective's like different, and it's not something that I fully understand, but it's hard to see God's glory in something really, really, really awful, like the killing fields or something like that in Cambodia. It's hard to see it. I don't know how it is, but it's there. I know it's there because Scripture says so. So we have to have that perspective. It's going to help keep things in proper order so that we're able to navigate what's going on and not operate off of what we want to see happen, and we want this marriage to get back together, and so we can feel good and we can feel comfortable. We need to take that step back. We need to rest in the comfort of knowing that this is, that God's got this, as the calendars would say, right? Mm-hmm. And be able to walk that out in faith and go, I might not understand what's going on right now, but I have a responsibility as a shepherd to protect this woman and to protect her kids from a situation I don't fully understand. But it needs to be done. And for too many men, unfortunately, they're not being men. And people are like, oh, you're too harsh on the church. I don't think I'm being harsh enough. They're not operating as men. Because what do men do when it comes to women and children. They step in front of them and get between them and the threat. And if the threat is their narcissistic, sociopathic husband, then men in leadership need to start doing that. They need to start being the ones that put themselves in that place and go, hold on, we're gonna figure this all out, and whatever the program and process is that's there. You want to be a member of this church? This is the program we have in place in order to have discernment about what's going on, because everybody's situation is different. And that's going to be one of my additional recommendations. Churches, not just get educated. You need to start having programs in place. Like you have to have a program in place for the kids in your youth group in pornography, which I know too many of you don't. You also need to have a program in place for understanding narcissistic sociopathic behavioral disorder, disruptions in marriage, what that looks like, and being able to do counseling for these things. There has to be a wider thing. And at a minimum, you have to get educated.
I think, too, as a product of the education, if there could be plans in place, again, you don't want to learn on the fly, because that's what you're talking about. That's nobody gets it right if you're learning on the fly. But begin to explore what kind of groups you could have. I don't know. We've visited a lot of churches, but I don't think there's been divorce recovery, single parent, just recovery from abuse. I think we saw one church that had a program in place for people who had been a victim of any kind of abuse. But anything like that, like something in place where we were talking about it earlier, some women, when they leave, they've never managed any of the finances. So something that's a mentorship of some sort, somebody who can kind of be a jack of all trades and work with them and say, hey, I can help you do that. But also, I have never had a single parent person who remained unmarried who had my situation. There's never somebody ahead of me like that. That is a hard thing. You have a loss in your life. You find people who have a similar loss, but women that in the church that are raising their kids by themselves, I don't feel like that exists. So I think that would be something to look into. And you might say, well, we don't have a lot of divorced people in our church. There's a reason.
Right. They're all leaving, right? No kidding.
There's nothing for them there.
Yeah. It's all family-oriented. Well, even Kelly and I experienced a lot of this. Look, there's nothing wrong with having churches structured around families. I get that. But there's also people that, by no fault of our own, we didn't have kids. And it's like, all of a sudden, it's like, well, you guys kind of don't exist anymore. But would you be willing to do some work for us? Oh, boy. I get it. There is a part of service that goes along with that. But there is a group of people that if you don't fit the Christian mold, you don't qualify anymore. And I can't help but think there was this dude like 2,000 years ago who talked to this one woman at a well who wasn't living the Christian life. And he took time out and revealed truth to her. So he spoke to the truth of her situation and what was going on, did it in a loving way. Guess what, guys? She was included, So.
Well, and the other thing, and it kind of harkens back to what we were just talking about a little bit ago, the suffering of somebody going through something like this eventually, if walked well, bears a great deal of fruit that is of benefit. And there's something you can learn something from people who have suffered deeply that you can never learn from anyone else, because the Lord suffered. That was day one to day end. Every day was about him suffering. And so those who suffer walk in fellowship with him in a way that you don't if you're not in that situation. So eventually, when they've kind of gone through the trenches and they're coming out, if they've been able to walk in deep intimacy with the Lord and with other believers, it will have a great deal of a work to do in your community, if you let it.
So obviously, depending on the size of the church, depending on what their financial resources are, I would even go so far as to say, as far as suggestions go, get somebody on staff that is a Christian / biblical / licensed therapist within your local area community, or however that breaks down, whether it's a federal thing or not, I don't know. Get somebody in there. And for members, for the church, even people in the community, I suppose, depending on how to break that down, what works best for you in your area, your situation, having that person available and having people know that they're available. And I would even argue there are certain things you want to take priority over others, depending on what the situation is. And being able to have a program in place, have somebody in place that understands a lot of these things, didn't learn it on the fly, narcissism and all the other things that go with it, and be able to work in coordination with church leadership in order to put the proper barriers, boundaries, help, assistance, whatever that looks like. Recognize not everybody's situation is the same. There is a difference between somebody who has been physically harmed or physically strangled or having threats of bodily harm versus somebody who's just asking questions to find out, am I in a safe marriage? I don't feel like I am, and being able to bounce those ideas up. They're similar category, but there's a vast difference between the urgency and the need for that kind of, so you need to have people and staff that can recognize and understand that, as well as understand that then therapist or person on staff has a lot of weight behind what it is that they say. Not, we got somebody on staff, but I don't believe in any of that mumbo jumbo. So whenever we have that monthly meeting and we start talking about things that are going on in the church so that the eldership is aware, so they're not looking down their nose at it thinking that this somehow is inconsequential or not a part of what they should be discussing.
And I think it leans back into finding that person. Utilize what you have. There was somebody who was going to go through this, and someone else said to them, I know somebody that we can connect you with. And the woman said, I know who it is. It's Laura. And I was like, it gets out. So if you know somebody who can help somebody in any way in this step, it doesn't even have to be formal. The point is it spreads. People figure out over the years somebody like this. So if you're a pastor and you know somebody in your community that has been through something like this, who does make themselves available, or if you know somebody in your community who, like you guys have done, have mentored kids or taught them how to box or taught them how to change their oil or, all those things, if we could even make it more of a community idea, it doesn't even have to be that formal. Although I would love it if it's formal. I love it if the church would put money behind it. All of this stuff. Get behind it. Hire somebody on staff. Have an existent budget for housing, for emergency housing, for giving, if it's a single mom, helping her with groceries. Not just once. Make it a thing. Every month we're going to give you $150 often when you're dealing with people who don't have resources, you are like, well, I'm going to give you a gift card because I don't trust that poor people will actually do something wise with their money. Give them money and don't ask what they spent it on. I get that everyone's uncomfortable with that, but making somebody feel small shouldn't be a part of this process. It's just a little side note for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. And let's also look, there's a difference between keeping secrets and keeping certain things private. And I'm just saying, if you've got a congregation of 800 people standing up at the altar and saying, by the way, Susan is having trouble in her marriage, we need to get some funds together in order to help her feel safe. That's not the best way to go about doing things. So having these discussions behind closed doors appropriately, having also women, since we're talking about women being abused, you need to have a woman representative that's also there, that's up to speed, that understands, like a liaison, so to speak, whether that's the actual therapist on staff or somebody, another department of leadership. By the way, I just want to mention this, okay? We always are, well, women can't teach, except for that whole weird, awkward part about Paul talking about that one woman apostle running around, spreading the gospel, operating within a position of authority and a position of leadership, and, doing what Christ commanded her to do. So parse it out, guys. Figure it out. Because a woman being abused by a man, that is the most intimate relationship that she has, and all of a sudden the second most intimate relationship, she's about to get into a closed door situation with you. She's not going to feel comfortable, not going to feel safe, and not going to say the whole story of what's going on. You need to have a woman on staff.
Especially because I just don't think in large part the male population that I speak to about this, there's just something you can see in the eyes where they don't have a connection to it. And some of that's just because we've talked about it. My son and I have talked about it. As a woman, I was trained from day one how to walk in a parking lot because I know I need to be aware. And on some level, I need to be afraid. Men don't think that way for a large part. They just kind of walk around and like, oh, it's dark in this parking lot. Is there something I should be concerned about? So just on those things alone, it's no fault of men that they can't understand some of the vulnerability that might exist in that situation. But know that and then bring in women to minister with you and make it a partnership.
And it needs to be done underneath the supervision of leadership, especially if it's going to be sanctioned by that church. Now, you had mentioned something, I want to jump back into it real quick. The idea of an emergency plan or a safe house or whatever the term is that you want to use. I'd spoken to somebody in our area about that, and he said, well, we don't have anything like that. We probably wouldn't do it. But if somebody needed, a hotel and they needed to be put up for something with them and their kids, that would be something we would look at doing. So whether it's an actual apartment that's kept, whether it's an actual area in the church itself, like an apartment that's in the back, or whether it's, the idea of springing for a hotel and being willing to put a family up for a month, whatever that looks like, put a program in place, have something so everybody knows what's going to happen. And this, by the way, there's a program, 100 people aren't involved in this program, like 2, maybe 3, because discretion matters. And if you've got 50 people knowing about the program and Susie Bubblegum's in there, how many people does Johnny Football Hero have to ask questions to before he finds out what hotel she's in, before he finds out the location of the apartment and goes beating on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's when everybody sleeps? So there are ways to go about doing things and putting programs in place where we're not being foolish. We're not being overly optimistic about about the results. And clearly, of course, learning is a process. You're going to figure out what works for your community and what doesn't over time. But this is something that churches can do in order to assist in removing women from dangerous situations. Now, maybe your church can't afford an apartment. Okay, but maybe there's 4 churches in your area that all kind of together, you guys can. And you guys can work it out and figure it out. There are ways to get things done is what I'm trying to say.
And this one isn't quite as, in depth as a suggestion, but I don't know how many churches anymore have church libraries. I'm revealing my age here because I used to go to the church library. I loved it. I love any library. But maybe we're going to attach, I listed 15 some books or resources. Have something, a corner set up or something where you have these resources available, and when people take a book, you fund it and put it back in of just these ideas and get that out there, make the education part of value. And you could even have, like you guys just attended this,
workshop.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was looking for. That's great. I think that was an excellent idea. I think it was open to the community. People could become a little bit educated about what abuse looks like in marriage and stuff like that. So I think that you can do stuff on smaller scales if it's too overwhelming to start a huge program.
Well, that's just it, though. But in tandem with that, the couple, the pastor and his wife that put this kind of program, the church that put this program together, I was talking to his wife, I think it was about a year ago, and we were talking about why it matters and what there's going to be a lot more need for psychological care, emotional care as we move forward into the future. I don't know if you guys know this. Spoiler alert, the Bible says everything's going to get worse over time. It's not going to absolutely get better, okay? So we can expect that there will be needs within the body that are these physical needs are going to need to be met. And the church is a great place to go get that done. So they were saying they were going to start instituting a counseling program. I said, you're bringing in a counselor. They're like, no, we're going to do a training program for the people that are serious about it. All leadership's going to get involved. There's the program. There's this one guy who runs this whole thing, and he's going to be doing workshops and all this. We got a chance to do it. Like, they didn't just say it. They did it. And is this 100% the best thing? It's a step. It's a step in the right direction. Shifts and changes the mindset of the body and of that congregation to understand this. This is actually a real situation. It's a real need, and we've been falling short in this. This is one of the ways in the past to kind of get to that nexus point of where the next jump point is.
And we mentioned it, I think, in the previous episode that the speaker at that event had made a big statement about that there's no such thing as grounds. I think Kelly also told me, he said people can change, but the likelihood of them changing as they get older is very slim. I've never had anyone confirm that. I say that all the time, and a lot of people will say, I'm just seeing it through the lens of my experience. Okay, but it's also happening. So, but to have him get up in that program, you had a room full of people. Maybe some of them think differently. Maybe them would never be qualified to be speaking into this situation, but you just had a whole room full of people hear something that I've not ever heard anyone say, especially from a Christian platform.
Well, that's encouraging. It's definitely good news because the message is getting out, or however you kind of want to say that. And once again, this was a little bit of a wider situation than the narrow focus of what this series has been about regarding marriage and divorce and abuse in that. But that the idea that somehow, some way, human beings are more than just logical machine generators or whatever. We're actually feeling, we're actually thinking, we actually have psychology to us. There are all these different components that are complex that make up the person. These things need to be addressed and need to be nurtured and cared for, or at a minimum recognized within the body itself.
I agree. That's all the things I have on my list. Do you have anything else you thought of?
One of the things that I want to mention is that, and this will probably segue into something we'll talk about later, and I touched on it briefly, but I got some teeth on this one. Men, you need to be men. And I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this nonsense of guys wanting to make sure that they're not being offensive and they're not this and they're not that, whatever it is. If you're involved in church leadership, this requires you to make decisions that are difficult and hard. Not mean, not balanced, educated, informed, but still difficult and hard nonetheless. And we need to start getting back to the idea that men are actually need to be shepherds, and they need to be protecting people, and they need to be watchful and educated and seeing what's going on out there. So for men, if you're in leadership and you're listening right now, this isn't just a bunch of nonsense. This isn't just a bunch of fluff. You have a responsibility to the people that are around you. And just because you're not abusing somebody, just because you don't know anybody in your immediate family, your family maybe is psychologically and emotionally healthy, doesn't mean it's not happening. Doesn't mean it's not in my church, in your church. Absolutely. And I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but we saw what in the concept of strangulation, 67% of the women that were strangled once was out of like a random sampling. It was like 1 in 8 or something like that. Like I forget what the statistics were. That's enough. Okay. That's enough. So if you're going along to get along, if you're in leadership and you're going along to get along, if you're in leadership and you're not making any hard stances, if you're in leadership and no one in the last 5 months, 4 months, 3 months has felt uncomfortable or had a difficult moment or gotten heated or had an exchange, you guys are not discussing controversial issues, you're not managing hard concepts, hard topics, and you're definitely not you're going along to get along. And you need to take a hard look at what it is that you're doing, and are you really addressing the needs of what's going on in your congregation, in that flock that you're to be shepherding over? Or are you sitting around feeling good, and are you sitting around making sure that you have all your needs met and everything's just fine there? Because in the West, we tend to have this whole idea of, well, I've got the gospel. I'm fine. I know I'm secure. And that's all that really matters. So God, take me away at any time. I'm ready to go live eternity. You're not called to do that. You're not. So step up, answer the call. If God put you in a position of authority and a place for it, we need to start taking that job, that role seriously. And by the way, the addendum on all of this, just because somebody says God called me to leadership doesn't mean that actually is true. So you guys need to also have a vetting program, and you need to be willing to take a look at the lives of these people that you're putting in positions of power that people are going to be looking to in their times of stress, their times of discomfort. It's like psychologists and the clergy. Those are the two main sources that people go to whenever they're experiencing trouble and trauma and difficulty in their life. And the men need to be vetted properly in order to make sure that they're not being put into a position where they're inert at worst or at best, and at worst they're actually wolves in sheep's clothing hiding, and they're there to be predatory.
Yeah, what you said.
I'm always leaving it on a bright note at the end, huh? Jeez.
You're always good to finish us off with a little bit of negativity and spit.
Why is the world so? Yeah, I don't approve. So if you are in church leadership and you know that this is an issue, and you don't feel like you have any support with any of the other elders that are around you, now's the time. Bring it up at the next meeting. Start getting the ball rolling and talking about it. check out Diane's free information and video and start passing that around and making sure that you kind of get this topic on the table. Might take a while, but you can do it. So that's the word of encouragement, towards the end here. So if you want to reach out to either Laura Kelly or myself and ask more, find out if there are any additional resources or clarification on anything that we've talked about over the course of this series, you can reach out to us at Naughty Versus Nice, VERSUS, nice@gmail.com. We'll be happy to answer your questions and do whatever we can and hopefully able to point you in the right direction. And on that note, we thank you very much for sticking with us through this difficult topic, this difficult conversation, and we will talk at you next time.